Shooter Breeze topic number 2 says the poster contradicts in views. He or she laments against Black equals African unity, but at the same time calls all Pan-Africanists to further divide Africa. Is our racial identity not stronger than our ethno-nationalist identity? Of course, this came with some attachments. I think it's 2 for this one. First one takes us to Twitter. Make sure you guys can see. Yeah, you guys can see. First one takes us to Twitter. It's a tweet from African Jesu. It says, Africans are not Black. We are Igbo, Yoruba, Ijaw, Acholi, Wolof, Yao, Abibia, Ashanti, Tonga, Maganda, Mende, Bakongo, Kikuyu, Bambara, Luo. Africans don't become Black until we travel to America or Europe. We become Black when we go to a West that chooses to see us that way. That's a interesting tweet. I guess he had a follow-up that says the quote, there are no Black people in Africa, Shuria Agawa, or whatever the name is, Agawa. I guess this is a picture of an article, there are no Black people in Africa. So, but this came with a second link. Let me just make sure this is the one that came with 2. Yeah. This came with a second link. This takes us to another tweet from the same person. It says, to our Pan-African brothers and sisters, if you want to dismantle the neo-colonialism plague in Africa, you have to support dismantling colonial contraptions such as Nigeria. These countries are the tools the West uses to maintain its grip on Africa. Anything else is a waste. Someone came by and said facts about 50 times. So that's the 2 tweets from this poster, with the topic being the poster contradicts in views, right? So we saw the 2 tweets about Blackness is not African, right? It only becomes African when Africans leave the continent. But then he is saying to Pan-Africanists, right, to go into Africa and deal with these things, right? When Black should equal African, that idea of unity. With that said, let me mix it up. Let me start with Oni for this one. Oni, what's it?
Oh yeah. So I think that the guy is saying, so for the first one he was saying, you're not really Black. You're one of these tribes. Black is probably an empty nomonym. I don't know the word, pseudonym. I don't know. But the other one was, he was like, we should dismantle our country, our borders for the countries, and then for a bunch of tribal states. Right? Again, this really comes back to, so I guess you could say it's twofold. One is you have 2 objectives. One, you have to have the intellectuals on the same page, right? And 2, to Buana's point, you have to have the propagandists doing the correct propaganda, right? You're having some meaningful propaganda. And the trouble is that we don't have that at place. So this guy clearly doesn't understand what a nation is for. Returning to tribes is not a thing you want to do. Tribes are great. I think tribes are really excellent. I had an opportunity to go into a village of what were the people called? I can't remember. Oh, Nyakusa. Oh yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful people. I get to go to their villages, and it's a really good life. I think you guys might have seen my drumming circle video. It's like they have drumming circles. They do cultural things. It's good stuff. But to say, hey, you know what? Let this be a nation doesn't even make any sense. Like if you are, like, again, I'm not trying to impress Elon Musk, but I appreciate what Bonner was saying about, your competition is the other nations on the planet, and dancing circles are not going to cut it when it comes to the other nations on the planet. I just saw one of the bombs America produced and sent abroad, and it's some work. You know, um, you're not going to counter that with dancing, okay? like that's not a thing. So I don't see the contradiction here. I mean, I don't know. Wait, what was the question? Sorry, let me go back to the question. Contradicts and views, laments about black equals African, but at the same time calls all Pan Africans to divide Africa, not stronger than. Yeah. So our racial identity not so again. I'm not even going to say, like, obviously I think when he says black, that's the thing that a lot of us don't remember, is that so black, it kind of goes back to that whole, you calling this guy white supremacist or whatever, right? Or at least let's go into the conspiracy theorists of the 90s, the conscious music of the 90s, where they used to say black is the inferior, you're not black, you're something, blah, 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 right? Yeah, but like technically, when you're in Africa, you're black, obviously. But it's not like there's no negative connotation. You're not black next to white. You know what I mean? You are just black, and so then you have further differentiation. You know, it's when you come to America that it's like, oh, there's the black people and the white people. There's that segregation from black and white. But in Africa, it's like, if you see a white person, or you mostly look at them as by their nation, you know, like, oh, look, this is an Arab, like kind of like how we talk in the Caribbean, where it's like, oh, these Indians, blah, blah, blah. You don't look at them as just Asians, although you could, but, whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't see it like, yeah, I think I ethnic identity is stronger. But I think that, the black identity um is not a strong identity. Now the African identity is a strong identity, but the black identity is not that strong. It's really just a designator for you know like for being pushed out of job work opportunities. You know what I mean? Or a designator for, just being the like the people we were just complaining about, or for like the music genres, like particular music genres. It's really not, you know, it, it's not as uplifting in this day and age. So in the common parlance. So I mean, yeah, a lot of people do not like. I can see it. I can see it, and I could also not see it. Um, that's all I could say.
In the chat, Trigger said something I'd like you to respond to if you don't mind. He said, I think Africans have to realize that we need to make our states more interconnected. That's how you combat Berlin states. You also have to not do the European model of a state. Real quick, only what say you to that comment from Trigger?
Oh yeah, so I was looking. So Trigger says I wouldn't say tribes in this case. I would say the small codes are nations. So what I'm saying is that, like, you look at Tanzania again. So like I said, like, again, you have to be there. So, like I said, the Nyakusa, they're in Mbeya, right? Really far from Dar es Salaam. Near Dar es Salaam, between Dar es Salaam and Mombasa, is the Tonga region. Tonga region has four different tribes, but most of the people there consider themselves Tonga. The point is that a lot of even though Trigger Happy says the European model of state, we have to come to terms with um the layout of societies, right? The layout of societies is that you have town and village, town and village, town and village. And most people live in towns. In fact, like, I think it's like 60% of the global population lives in towns, like lives in cities or something. And it's probably more than 50, 60, but the point is that it's more than 50, right? So more than half of us live in towns. Um, and so a lot of wealth is concentrated in towns. And so when you start dividing these nations, you're leaving certain ethnic groups with the entirety of those towns. You get what I'm saying? And so like if you look at that map, you see Tanzania. You guys can't see my map, obviously, but I think Dar es Salaam is probably like in a dark blue region. And there's like a purple region nearby, and there's this in the region, that kind of stuff. The point being that when you give one group of people all of that, like everything that's going on with that, with those towns, like for instance the power plant, this, that, so on and so forth, and then you start making inter travel between that a little bit more limited, a little bit more constrained, a little bit more like more bordered, more so on and so forth, then you're coming into the problem of how to of basically you're going to start creating these wealth disparities between tribal groups, and then it's going to be nasty work in the future. So trigger happy, and now granted, this is, as Trigger Happy is saying, is like you are kind of adopting the European model, but the trouble is that that's going to be the model that people are going to be operating from at this point in time. Like if you were to just do it right now. So Oni said, so Trigger Happy said, Oni, you are not really understanding what I meant by European model of state. I'm talking about a nation state model. Nation state model causes tribalism. This is the aspect of Nigeria, for example. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like an African state model would acknowledge that we have multiple nations in the state. So what I'm saying is that in theory, right, dismantling the borders today would, I mean, of course, I don't, because again, those groups, while they are kind of autonomous, they're not autonomous for the purpose of town and village models, you know, and because they're not autonomous for that, you're essentially like you would set yourself up for failure, you know. So like essentially there are ports around, you know, Dar es Salaam. There are ports around Mombasa, and who gets those ports? I think it was actually Asar Motep who said it best. Like it was my favorite tweet that he put. I can't find it again, but his tweet was something along the lines of, um, every kingdom in the like every kingdom. He said every kingdom was around like defending trade or something like that, you know. Now I don't remember the quote obviously perfectly, but the idea is that, you know, even if you look at these groups from once upon a time, a lot of the kingdoms, a lot of the powerful kingdoms, what they were doing was they were providing security for the trade in between Africa, right? And so when you make more nations, more kingdoms, um, you're either cutting people out of the trade, or you're just increasing the cost of the trade within Africa, you know. So and the issue with this is that it assumes that these tribal boundaries, if you will, or these ethnic boundaries would be static in time, and that they wouldn't coalesce per se. And so the way how they're coalesced now isn't optimal, but to make it smaller is worse than to make it bigger. Like I think that we should try to make the nations bigger and coalesce more within each other. But what this quote unquote this person is proposing is to make them smaller, and that's going to increase the cost of trade, and it's going to cut some of our people out, and things of that nature. Like for instance, Mbeya was very isolated, very remote, but they received benefits from Dar es Salaam and Tanzania as a whole because they were part of the same nation. If you were to cut off Mbeya and say these are Nyakusa, and you cut off the Kilimanjaro and say these are Chaga, and you cut off the Tonga region and you say these are Tongas, and then you say Dar es Salaam is going to go to, you know, one of these groups, you know, and sure you can keep the people in here, or maybe kick them out. It doesn't matter. Not that it doesn't matter. It's the other people who are theirs for them to decide. When you have that, you're really cutting Mbeya off, cutting the Tonga region off, cutting Kilimanjaro off, and cutting Rufiji off, and then you're making like you're putting at people to the mercy of these ethnic groups that may not necessarily work together as well as we would want as Pan Africanists. So it's just a weird, like it's just a weird ask, I think.
Appreciate that, Oni. In the chat, Anthony McPhail posted. I hope I shouted you out earlier. If not, shout out to Anthony. Thanks for coming through. He said to me, during anti-colonial movement in the Central African Republic, one of the major independence organizations was called the Movement for the Social Evolution of Black Africa. Goes on to say, under colonialism, African people knew they were Black, but in flag independence, Africa, I guess, they just ethnic group, I guess, became ethnic group since everyone's Black below the Maghreb. Okay, I feel you on that. I feel so. Before independence, everyone knew they were Black. Flag independence made them kind of start to adhere to tribe and stuff more. All right. Let's see if Ben is still around. I know sometimes Ben falls asleep. Is Ben still around there? Okay, look like Ben is not there. Let me go to Buana next on this one.
I would never disrespect what the continental Africans do in terms of tribes and tribalisms that happens on the continent itself. But we have learned, the Africans who have lived outside of Africa has learned that there is strength in unity. And playing the game of tribalism, I feel like it creates weaknesses that exist continuously, and maybe it'll exist forever. Who knows? But I do know this: the Chinese have ethnic groups in China. They have multiple ethnicities that exist in China. But when they come to Africa, they play to Chinese. They don't play up their ethnicities, distinct ethnic groups, and all these other things. And the boys who've been in South Africa for eons have been able to control the economy in South Africa, even though they're outnumbered, because they play this game of divide and conquer. There are many different tribal groups in South Africa. You know what I mean? So they play each other. They play them off of one another. This is the reason why such a small minority can control such a large majority in South Africa. So you say that people from the Blacks who exist outside Africa should come in and play the same kind of politics of the colonial Africans. I see that as a mistake, and I don't want to play that game, because I've learned certain things from my sojourn outside of the continent in understanding that we are greater together than we are apart, despite the fact that our so-called tribal distinctions that we make among one another. There are some brothers who want to play that game now in the West, and we'll see how that turns out for them. But I'm saying that I'm not willing to play that game, because my sojourn and the 400 years we exist in these sides of the world has taught us we are better together than we are apart. So even if we was to go into the continent of Africa, we are not going to integrate into that experience, because I feel that to do that is a mistake. You make yourself weaker, because you are playing geopolitics of the world now. You know, not your limited factions or what goes on in terms of the things that exist within the continent itself. You are playing world politics now. So I have to operate from a different kind of experience, because I feel like I make myself weaker in playing that internal game of tribal politics. I'm not going to do that in the current global world we exist in right now. So that's my answer to that question. Also, let me say this too. There are continental Pan-Africans that exist on the planet within Africa. They should be able to resolve their issues. Why are you all suggesting that Pan-Africans from outside of Africa resolve the issues that exist within Africa? Go appeal to Affion, or Sister Affion. Go appeal to Julius Malema. Go appeal to the Pan-Africans go appeal to Kemi Seba. He's in Africa. He's a Pan-Africanist. Why do the outside Pan-Africanists have to resolve what's going on internally in the continent of Africa? Why don't you appeal to the Pan-Africans that exist within the continent itself? But that's my answer to that question. But I'll stop there.
Well, but how do we know that the appeal is into both Pan-Africanists, home and abroad?
I thought the question saying coming in. I thought he was saying from external Pan-Africans looking at the situation and coming. I didn't think that the appeal was collectively for all the Pan-Africans. I thought the question was addressing external Pan-Africans and not necessarily Pan-Africans that exist currently on the continent itself. So maybe I misunderstood the context of the question.
Yeah, no, I was just asking because he just said to our Pan-African brothers and sisters, if you want to dismantle the neocolonialism, blah, blah, blah. So to me, it could have been both on the continent and outside of the continent, you know, but he's making that appeal through Twitter or whatever. But that's how I took it. Any and all Pan-Africanists should be involved in trying to find and implement these solutions, I believe. I like this comment here from Oni in the chat. He says, anytime you surrender autonomy, this is what Buano's getting at, you're at the mercy of those you surrender it to. If you want Africa to adopt a philosophy, then we shouldn't surrender territories to others. I like that. I'm feeling that one there. I know Black Steel is champing at the bit. I know he feels neglected. We haven't spoken to him in a minute here. Black Steel, take it away.
All right. So this is my thoughts about this. And I always remember a quote from Dr. Huey P. Newton of the Black Panther Party. He says that power is the ability to define reality, to define phenomenon, and to have it act in a desired manner. So while I respect, he was saying Africans not being Black, the reality is that as an African person, you will be treated as Black because the people who define our reality, unfortunately, these white psychopaths say you're Black, and they have the ability to enforce their definition of reality through their institutions, through their military. I think that when we run from, oh, I'm not Black, we identify with, whatever tribe you're not, no disrespect, but I think it dilutes our power base because our condition as African people is a direct result of our skin color, not our tribal groupings, not what part of the continent we were from, or whether African American or Afro Caribbean. They hate you because you're Black, because of your skin color, and it's because of this that's a source of unity and a source of strength to us. And I think when we dilute that, it makes us weaker. And so I'm not against people choosing to express themselves however they want to, but I also understand that clinging to this whatever tribal mentality you might have is really a way to divide and conquer us, like Juan and Oni were saying. That's white people's main strength. They know how to divide us. They know how to keep us fighting each other long enough for them to walk up and steal the bag or enslave us or take our resources. This has to stop. Okay. We are all facing a common enemy. In the face of our common enemy, our great enemy, our great foe, we can't have any type of, oh, I'm not Black, I'm this, I'm not Black, you're that. When we all know if they put you on in New York City, you wouldn't catch a cab. You wouldn't be able to get a cab. If the cops pull you over, they're not worrying what tribe you're from. You're a nigger. So I understand you may not like to be Black. Okay, whatever. This is the reality. We are an oppressed people. Our enemy has designated us by our skin color. How do we organize and fight back against? I don't think it's the time for any type of petty tribalism. That's part of the reason. Again, going back to understanding how we got in the condition we're in. This is part of the reason European was able to dominate and still dominates our mother continent. They were able to play off one tribe, one group against another. And while they were fighting each other, they were able to come in and steal the resources, steal the land, the people, everything. This type of thinking is backwards. We got to move past this. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Coach.
I appreciate that, Black Steel.
Yep, that's exactly what they do.
Ben is back. Ben, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's what these nations, that's what these tribe politics are. They're all they do is they use us to distract and fight civil wars, which they're funding both sides. the elites that are trying to control the tribes, they fund both sides to make sure they get what they want. And all they want is a nation be destabilized and a nation to be conquered. And that is all they need to do. It's very simple if people figure that out and have that strategy to put together. So you better be ready and start. You need to start to strive for your African nation, your history, and be proud of it. And that is exactly what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to listen to all this and continue listening, and we get to another topic. You're the mic.
All right. Really quick, just really quick from everyone up here. What are your guys' feelings on the old idea that sometimes comes up again and again, especially again and again in East Africa, about the federation, the cardinal directions, the North Federation, East, West, South Federation? What are y'all guys' thoughts on federations, and how would tribes kind of work within that paradigm? Anyone can go.
I don't know how. Go ahead, bro.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
I don't know how tribes would work within that. I don't really know. This is what I realize. I understand. Like, I try to look at the big picture. I consider myself a radical, so I like to get to the root issue of the problem. So the root problem is that African people, Black people, are an oppressed group. So my question would be, how does your grouping of tribes challenge or oppose the oppression that African people face? So to me, if you're going to build a nation state, to me, if the goal is not the liberation and the freedom of African people, and you want to cling to these tribes, I mean, I don't know. I think this tribal identity is more of a hindrance than a help. It's not something that is going to really benefit us in the long run, and it allows our enemies, which we can never underestimate them. To underestimate your enemy is a poor thing to do. They're able to use that and to play off of that. Well, that tribe, they say they're better than you. We can give you the weapons you need to defeat that tribe. If you do it for us, and you defeat them, that this is how they've always worked. So to me, I feel like the tribe, whatever tribe, how that works would be more of a hindrance. I think that the idea that, I think we have to come to terms that we are African people, regardless of where, as long as you're Black, you're an African, like Peter Tosh said, and we got to go from there and use that to organize and unify. I don't agree with any form of tribe. I think it's redundant. I'll stop there. Thank you.
I think that a federation would be something that's interesting in terms of when you talk about federated states. You're talking about something like the United States where you have sections. That would be interesting. And where you have a centralized, I guess, government, and the states are independently able to make decisions in and of themselves. However, they have the federation, the federal government. It's kind of like Nigeria or even the United States. The federal government supersedes state laws and things of that nature. That's interesting. The only problem, it's not a problem. Africa is an old continent, very old continent, and there's a whole lot of moving parts because of history, because of the old grudges. Oh goodness, man! It's just sometimes I say to myself, what would be quick and effective is force. I don't like to say that out loud. When I'm to myself, I look back at history and I say to myself, how was a group of nations in Europe able to galvanize and get all these people in this large landmass with millions and millions of different languages and cultures to move in a particular way and group in and create a scenario where they instate their own laws and ways and means about doing things. They use extreme force, gunboat diplomacy. Now, you don't want to think like that because you want to be able to reason with men, sit down and show them why you feel like this is the best way going forward and to protect your nation state, federation, government, or whatever going forward. Because you have very petty men. You have petty men who don't believe in reason. They don't believe, they wouldn't listen to you. They don't believe in reason. You know, they they will run their own little small little plot with that group of people paying homage to them forever, even though the greater interest supersedes that little petty little uh, plot a line they want to fight over. So what do? You forcefully remove these kinds of people. Now, I don't want to say that for black people because I think that black people have the ability to reason, but I'm understanding that some men can't reason. So what is the alternative? You have to forcefully do it. You have to forcefully to create a scenario where what you're talking about in terms of the moving parts is going to create. If you do want to do it right now, it's going to create you're going to have to engage people with a whole lot of force, like how these guys did with the Berlin Conference. Would that be right and righteous? I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. But I just think it'll be there to do it in a way where you convince people, sit down, discuss, dialogue. It'll probably take another 1,000 years before people actively move. But at the butt of a gun, you get people running and moving and doing the things you want to do. Now that's a bad thing to say, but I just want to see how it'll be executed. Theoretical things, you're talking about regionalism and sectioning the continent off in quadrants and things like that is a good thing to discuss. But when you get down to brass taxes or how you're gonna go about doing it, that's when that's where the real discussion lies. And for me, to do it now time, lifetime, is going to take a whole lot of force. To do it in a diplomatic way, it may take another 1,000 years. But that's a whole other matter. That's what I feel about that. But I'll leave it there.
Only what say you? Just keep it brief for me before we move on.
Yeah, so as far as the federation is concerned, like you mean a federation of ethnic groups? Because, again, I do not think we should be giving autonomy, or we should be seeking to increase the autonomy of ethnic groups, simply because, again, like them at a continental level, like it doesn't even make any sense to extend their influence to a continental level. A lot of these ethnic groups are not autonomous bodies that should that would control states on a continental level. They didn't mature to that level in a sense, and simply forfeiting our influence, um or it's said differently, I think that Africa or African people need to adopt an ideology or a mindset. A lot of what you were saying earlier was, hey, how do our people adopt a better mindset? Um, and I said, look, you need to have state power. You're not supposed to give state power away. If you can get state power, you do not give it away. You use it to transform our mindset, to transform our people. And essentially this whole federation talk is essentially saying, no, if I had state power, I would give it away to the chiefs, but you don't even know these chiefs. You know what I mean? So that's all I'll say.
That's an interesting take. Interesting take. Yeah, that's something to think about. Okay. Real Black Gentleman in the chat said Egypt and Syria were once a union called the United Arab Republic. There's a bunch of other comments, Trigger, Happy, and Oni going back and forth with some things. You guys who are listening to the playback, or if you're listening live but not watching your screens, check in on the chat. Some interesting information often comes out of there. Let's move on to Shoot the Breeze topic number 3, though, for time's sake.